The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons and The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages were both released on the Game Boy Color on February 27th, 2001. They were made by a partnership of companies called Flagship. Flagship was a partnership of Nintendo, Capcom, and Sega. These games took place not in Hyrule, but in the distant lands of Holodrum and Labrynna. It featured 3 characters that the games were focused around. These characters were named Din, Nehru, and Furore. They were named after the goddesses of Hyrule, who each left behind a piece of the Triforce. Din was the Oracle of Seasons, Nehru was the Oracle of Ages, and Furore was the Oracle of Secrets. You might ask, why is it that these characters are featured, yet only 2 of them have games themselves? The answer to that comes from early development history. What was originally planned were 3 Zelda games in this storyline. IGN says that they were originally titled The Mystical Seed of Power, The Mystical Seed of Wisdom, and The Mystical Seed of Courage. These 3 Zelda games were to have this passcode system that went between all of them. It turned out Nintendo didn't have the resources to figure out how to get the passcode system working on 3 separate games, so they reduced it down to 2 that could swap passcodes between each other and interact with one another. Now, these 2 games, when you look in Zelda Encyclopedia, are numbered as the 7th entry in the Zelda series. You might ask, why are 2 games taking up 1 spot? They're released on 2 separate cartridges. There are 2 Virtual Console releases on the 3DS, and there are even 2 entries in the Switch Online service. When you look at the original box, right on the front it says play both for the ultimate adventure. When you look at the back, it repeats this idea. It says friends and enemies will travel between the 2 games. There's only one Nintendo player's guide for both games, perhaps supporting the idea that this is only 1 entry in the Zelda series. But even on the front of the Nintendo player's guide, it says complete strategies for both games. So, how do these games even connect? After you've beaten the second game in what they call a linked game, where you play one then the other, there's actually a final boss that's inaccessible unless you beat both games. In this combined ending, Twinrova uses the deaths of Varon and Onyx to resurrect Ganon. Hyrule Historia even says that the citizens of Holodrum and Labrynna are sacrificed, though I can't find this in either of the games. An interesting thing about Twinrova is that if you play Oracle of Seasons first, then Ages next, Twinrova will mistakenly call the boss of Oracle of Seasons Nox. So, Ganon has to be resurrected by Twinrova. That means that he's dead at the start of these games. Where was he killed? In the timeline, Ganon is killed in A Link to the Past before you get to the Oracle games. He resurrects as a beast because he was last seen in A Link to the Past as Beast Ganon. There's some unused art of Ganondorf that was supposed to be incorporated into the Oracle games, but you can see why it never got used. If he was in his beast form when he was resurrected and defeated in that form, how could he ever turn back into Ganondorf? So the question arises, is the Link from A Link to the Past that killed Ganon the same one that's in the Oracle games? This is where we get to the difference between the timeline presented in Hyrule Historia in 2011 and in Zelda Encyclopedia in 2017. Hyrule Historia says that these games share the same link. However, Zelda Encyclopedia makes the specific claim that these are 2 different links, one for the Link to the Past, and the other one for Oracle of Seasons and Ages. There is a note as to the position change of the Oracle games in Zelda Encyclopedia. This note says, attentive readers may note that the timeline shown here differs slightly from the one found in Hyrule Historia. The timeline can be interpreted in a number of ways, and may change depending on new discoveries that have come to light, and on the player's imaginations. Not only does this mess up the chronology of Hyrule Historia in the timeline alone, separating the Oracle Link from the one that was in Link to the Past in Link's Awakening, it also messes up other details that are in Hyrule Historia. The most notable detail that this messes up is the note about Marin and Terran on this page of Hyrule Historia. It says, residents of Mabe Village on Koholint Island. Similar characters also appear in Holodrum, and in Hyrule during the era of the Hero of Time. Terran and Marin may be the product of Link's memories of Malon and her father Talon of Lon Lon Ranch. Now, how can Link remember Malon and Talon from Lon Lon Ranch and Holodrum when he's a completely different Link than the one that was in Link's Awakening? Another note that we should bring to attention is that in Link's Awakening, which is supposed to take place after the Oracle games in the Hyrule Historia timeline, Link fights against his memories of bosses from previous games. The final nightmare at one point takes the shape of Ganon. Now the question you might be asking if you're looking at the Hyrule Historia timeline is he remembering his initial battle with Ganon in A Link to the Past? Or is he remembering his battle with Ganon that happens in the Oracle games, once he's resurrected? It's hard to say, because Ganon from both of these games looks similar and attacks very similar, but it could be that he's only remembering Ganon from A Link to the Past. In that case, the Oracle games don't really play into what he was remembering in that scenario. Another thing is the continuity of the Triforce. In A Link to the Past, the game ends when Link touches the Triforce and wishes to reverse everything that Ganon did to the land of Hyrule and its people. Then, when Oracle of Seasons and Ages starts up, Link goes to the castle to see the Triforce. The Triforce sends him on a journey throughout these lands of Holodrum and Labrynna. Is it necessary that Link had to wish on the Triforce before the Triforce sent him on a quest in these games? No, it's never explained that that's what's happening, but you could jump to that conclusion if you're reading the Hyrule Historia timeline. If you're reading the Zelda Encyclopedia timeline, then Link simply encounters the Triforce and it sends him on a journey. So there's no real reason as to why the Triforce has to be wished on by Link before it sends him on a quest. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at Link's Awakening. It's stated that Link's Awakening is a dream that is shared between the Windfish and Link, and their memories combined. So some of the content that happens in the Windfish's dream comes from Link's sleeping mind. Does Link remember anything from the Oracle games? We already went over the appearance of Ganon in those games. But are there other links that we can make between the Oracle games and Link's Awakening? One thing to take note of is that the graphics are nearly identical between the Oracle games and Link's Awakening. Another thing to look at is that at the end of the Oracle games, once you've beaten the Linked game, Link sails away on a ship that is nearly identical to the ship that Link is sailing at the beginning of Link's Awakening before he's struck down by lightning. One of the issues we see with the Hyrule Historia timeline is that it puts A Link to the Past before the Oracle games, and the artwork change doesn't seem to make sense. The artwork in A Link to the Past depicts Link as a young adult. The artwork in Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages depicts Link as a younger-looking child. People don't advance backwards in age. Now this could simply be an artistic difference, a design change. Link actually did grow up, but because the art style is different, it's harder to tell. And this brings me to another topic, the artwork for A Link to the Past. You might have seen that there are at least two different sets of artwork for A Link to the Past. One of them was released in 1991, coinciding with the release of the original game. Another one came out with the Game Boy Advance release. The Game Boy Advance release has artwork that looks more similar to modern Zelda games, and the one in 1991 looks like what you might find in a 90s anime. The reason for this change seems to be that Nintendo started doing their own artwork for games after Link's Awakening. There's an interview in the back of Art and Artifacts where the developers talk about how they shifted over to in-house artists for the depictions of Link in Ocarina of Time. And this continued on for the rest of the time they were developing Zelda games. What's even stranger from the difference in art style between the Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance versions is the artwork from the Nintendo Player's Guide. There's a different set of art for the Nintendo Player's Guide than even the two other releases of the game. I'm not really a huge fan of this style, but it is interesting to see so many different styles for a single game. There was a manga that released around the same time that the game was coming out in 2001. This manga was made by a group of Japanese artists named Akira Himekawa. They depicted this Link as a separate Link from A Link to the Past. The way they depict his relatives is different between the two games. In A Link to the Past, they rightly showed his uncle with him at the beginning of the game. They depicted Link's grandparents with him in the Oracle games. Link's grandparents are never shown in-game. In fact, none of Link's relatives are ever shown in the Oracle games. Link simply shows up on a horse and goes to Hyrule Castle to seek the Triforce. Let's look at the continuity of the Master Sword between Zelda games. Link gets the Master Sword in A Link to the Past, and after he defeats Ganon with it, he puts it back in its pedestal in the Lost Woods. The game's narration says it sleeps there forever. And of course, there are games that come after this, like A Link Between Worlds, where Link takes the Master Sword back out again. But the big problem we can see here is that Link gets the Master Sword again in the Oracle games. And where does he find it? Good question. It should be in Hyrule, but it can actually appear in 4 separate places in the Oracle games. This depends on whether you beat Oracle of Seasons or Ages first, and then it also depends on how you complete the quests in-game. Because whatever one you complete last to get a sword upgrade, that's when you get the Master Sword. And it's odd that the Master Sword shows up in Holodrum and Labrynna. So why is that? Shouldn't it still be in Hyrule, in the Lost Woods? That's where Link last left it, after all. This is answered by Zelda Encyclopedia. Zelda Encyclopedia says that this Master Sword is not the same Master Sword that showed up in A Link to the Past. This Master Sword is simply the upgraded Noble Sword, and it has the same or similar attack power as the Master Sword from A Link to the Past. Speaking of weapons, Onyx, the main villain of Oracle of Seasons, has an amazing weapon. In this image, we see him wielding a battle axe with a ball and chain on the end of it. Now just think of that. If you swing the battle axe, the ball and chain will follow. But if you don't know how to swing it, you're going to easily end up hitting yourself with the ball. So, you would need to be extremely adept to wield this properly. Something people also look at for the continuity of these games is the presence of races that don't exist in Link to the Past in the Oracle games. Gorons and Subrosians show up in the Oracle games, where they were never there before in A Link to the Past. One of the cool things about this world that we see is that there are characters who interact between Holodrum and Labrynna. For instance, there are these characters named Bippin and Blossom, who raise a child throughout the games. This child starts out in the first game, and as he grows up, he becomes an adult by the next game that you play. Exactly how long is Link out there adventuring in Holodrum and Labrynna? One of the mechanics in Oracle of Ages is that you can move back and forth between the present and 400 years in the past. In this, we actually have a story of two characters who live across that gap. You hear that Queen Ambi is building this dark tower that's terrorizing the citizens. She wants to make a monument so she can find her long-lost lover. When you go to the future, you see there is a skeleton captain who is stuck in this raging sea and he can't get out of it. He's been stuck in this sea for 400 years. It turns out that the skeleton captain of this ship is the same lover who Queen Ambi was trying to attract. Now that is a tragic love story. We can look at what happens to Zelda from A Link to the Past to the Oracle games. In A Link to the Past, Link rescues Zelda from the castle dungeon after hearing a telepathic message from her. After rescuing her, he brings her to a church after leading her through a series of tunnels. When we get into the Oracle games, Zelda first meets you in the second game in a linked game. When she sees you, she tells you, "My name is Zelda." Why would she need to introduce herself when she knew you so well from A Link to the Past? This is one of the major flaws of the Hyrule Historia timeline. The Zelda Encyclopedia explains it better. Since these are two separate links, Link and Zelda would have never met before. If they are in fact the same Link, this could be explained away, but it's just awkward. I think I have an explanation for what's going on here, an indication as to where these games really go in the timeline. If you look at the Link's Awakening manual, in the prologue, this passage shows up. Your world faded to black as you sank into the darkness of the storm-tossed sea with the remains of your craft. But in the cold darkness of the deep, you heard a comforting voice that reminded you of home. It was the voice of Princess Zelda. "You're going to be all right," the voice said. "What a relief." You opened your eyes to find Princess Zelda standing over you. Or was it? Actually, it turned out to be a woman named Marin. From this, we hear that Link wakes up to the voice of Zelda.
Wake up, Link.
Marin and Zelda apparently sound the same, but that brings up the obvious question. Does Marin smell like Zelda? At the end of the Oracle games, once Link beats Ganon, Zelda gives Link a kiss. This only happens in the Oracle games and in The Adventure of Link. One thing they should have done in this ending scene was use Zelda's theme from Zelda 2. They didn't do that, but fortunately, that theme comes back in the Minish Cap. It's actually remixed with Zelda's Lullaby from A Link to the Past. So looking at all the evidence, it seems that the Oracle Link is a separate Link from the one in A Link to the Past. Although you could shoehorn it in between A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, it really makes a whole lot more sense just on its own. Although I agree with the placement in the timeline from Zelda Encyclopedia, I disagree that it should be numbered as a single game. In conclusion, these are the Oracle games, not the Oracle game.